Genuinely wonderful human being in the great country of New Zealand. And so thank you for being here from tomorrow for today.
Thank you, Jason. Very kind.
All right, Deb, if you could go ahead and scoot over. Serena's off camera, so we're not going to introduce her. Serena she now works on the internet. And so if you ever want to watch her videos and YouTube, she just hit 10,000 followers on YouTube. She makes great content. I made Deb leave because I'm the host today. I don't actually have to go anywhere in 1 minute. So
I finally got the actual stream running to YouTube. So if some of you are watching going, why are there two streams? Just go to the one that has stuff on it.
Okay. Do you see my slides?
Yes, I see your slides.
Good. It is 1 o'clock. Welcome to this Black Hills Information Security webcast. We're going to transition to the webcast now. If you are not speaking or talking today during the webcast, please kill your camera and microphones, which means we got Tess. Who left? Oh, Adam left. No. Oh, no. Everyone's here. It just shifted. Okay. And you're behind the camera. All right. We got Kellen, we got Tess, we got Brian, we got Adam from Red Canary are joining us today. And we're going to introduce the new Red Canary expansion deck for Backdoors and Breaches. So first of all, you have to know what Backdoors and Breaches is. It's an incident response card game that we created back in 2019 that didn't suck. It was actually useful and useful. And so people seemed to like it. And then during the pandemic, people started using it. Then we had an online version and more people started using it. Then more people started using it. And then we finally got to the point where other companies like Red Canary and Huntress and a few others that are coming out later this year and early next year wanted to make expansion decks. And we were like, we don't know how to do that. And so we all figured it out together. And so this came from Brian and I met at a Wild West Hackin' Fest a long time ago. And I showed Brian the deck and he's like, yeah, we can make an expansion deck. And then like a year and a half, 2 years later, here we are. So that is fantastic. All right. So before we get started, there might be people who are watching right now that have no idea who Red Canary is. And that'd be like people who not knowing who Black Hills is. And so like every once in a while, like I was at an insurance conference recently where no one knew who we were. And I felt very unpopular and I didn't know how to handle that. But for those of you that don't know who Red Canary is, Brian, can you please introduce Red Canary for us and what it does?
Yeah, I sure can. So for this crowd, we may well be the folks that created Atomic Red Team, which we're more than happy to be well known for. But what we actually do, the thing that the company does to make money, is manage detection and response. So we grab signals, telemetry, records, data, for lack of a better word, from our customers' endpoints and clouds and identities and email and anything else you can grab telemetry from. And we run it through an engine where we do custom detection and response on top of it, right? So we detect threats in our customers' environments, and then we help them sort of sort out what they need to do in response to those threats.
Cool. And Atomic Red Team, what is that, Adam?
Atomic Red Team is a library of adversarial tests. So let's say you have defenses and defenders, and you want to do a mic check to make sure they can find the kinds of things that real adversaries are doing. Well, it's MITRE ATT&CK ALIGN. So you can say, well, for technique ID 1, 2, 3, 4, I want to see if we would notice this in our environment. And it's a community-driven library of things that'll test for that. So it's sometimes these things are as easy as copy and paste. And then beyond Atomic Red Team, that library, there's a suite of what we call the Atomic family. And there's all sorts of test runners and applications and libraries and the like to make firing Atomic Red Team tests just trivial and chaining them together and the like there. And so it's this one library that's grown out to be this really powerful suite of tests and tooling that people can use to validate their defenses and defenders.
Yep. Adam and I might be the only two human beings on the planet who are trying to make the Atomic family happen. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever uttered those two words.
Yeah, but that's okay. So every time we get an opportunity to say it out loud, we're going to take it.
And a quick answer to Phil's question. Yes, Phil, I can make that jump. All right, moving on. Okay, so we got Backdoors and Breaches, how to play. We're not going to talk about how to play Backdoors and Breaches today. We've done webcasts on that. I've done over 200 demos over the last 3 years on how to play Backdoors and Breaches. And so what I'm going to say here is if there's anyone that's listening that wants us to do a free demo for you at your organization, then you can just type the word demo into Zoom. Nope, I didn't think this out. Nope. Go ahead and put the word demo into Discord and then we'll reach out through a DM and see about setting that up in the future. So go ahead and send, just type demo into Discord and we'll work that out. If you're not on Discord, join Discord. Okay, so we're not going to teach how to play Backdoors and Breaches today because we've covered that in webcasts and things like that before in the past, and it would take a whole hour. So that's not what we're doing today. So what we're doing today is we're introducing the new version of Backdoors and Breaches, the Red Canary expansion deck. And let me just say that I enjoyed the process of making the Red Canary expansion deck. I loved working with Tess and Kellen and Brian and Adam. We had the best time. Deb was there. We all had a great time, like figuring out what cards should go in, what cards shouldn't go in, how it should be worded, how it shouldn't be worded. And it is now available for you to use on play.backdoorsandbreaches.com. If you go to dev.backdoorsandbreaches.com, you can see all the features that we're going to roll out in the future and us trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And if you go to demo.backdoorsandbreaches, we're trying to figure out a way for Backdoors and Breaches online to be interactive, which means if you click on a procedure, it takes you to a CTF, and then you actually have to solve that CTF in order to flip the card. We're not there yet, but if you want to see what it looks like, you can go ahead and try demo.backdoorsandbreaches.com. But play.backdoorsandbreaches.com already has everything that you need in order to play the Red Canary deck. The Red Canary deck, like being able to buy it, will happen at the end of either September or something like that. Because Red Canary is going to be giving this away at at Black Hat in August. So if you want to get the physical Red Canary deck, go visit them at Black Hat in August. Okay, if you don't want to use the public version of play.backdoorsandbreaches.com, you can always grab it from GitHub, bring it into your own environment. It's got all the assets, all the everything. You can just use it there, so that way you don't have to use it in a public way. So you can grab it from GitHub. It's got everything, and every time we update it to GitHub, so you have all the new resources there if you want them. The online store, we do have an online store, which someone mentioned in Discord, and so if you want to get the new playmats, you can. This is not a commercial for playmats. It's just I get so many requests for these playmats and people didn't want to print them themselves. I finally went out and bought 300 of them, and I'm going to put them on the store so that people can have them. And then that way it looks a little more official when you do it internally. And so when senior leaders are like, so you're playing a game? You're like, no, it's not a game. It's just a way to have seriously consequential conversations in a fun and engaging way. And if you're like, that sounds like a game, and you're like, no, that's fine. Right. And then next, we're actually going to introduce all the different cards that are in the expansion deck. And I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to ask a lot of questions. And so the Red Canary team is here to introduce the cards that they came up with and why these cards. Because one of the things is like they have to fit in with the core deck. You can't break the core deck when you make an expansion deck. So there's a lot of gameplay things that happened and wording things that happened and making sure stuff came together so that way we didn't break the core deck when you add this new expansion deck onto it. So I'm going to ask the Red Canary team to introduce these cards and explain it to you like they explained it to me, because I'm always the person with the least amount of cybersecurity knowledge on any phone call I'm ever on. And so go ahead, let's get started. Tess, I think it was you that did the USB drive-by card. Could you explain why you wanted this in the game and what it does and how the attack works?
So it was a combo platter, and thanks again, by the way, for removing our very creative titles. We had some very creative punny titles that you guys would have seen, but they didn't match with the rest of the deck. So,
Yeah, I was an absolute killjoy during the meetings where I was like, that's too clever. It has to go, like, you need to be able to explain it in a textbook sort of way. And they're like, fine.
And I think that's an important thing to note, even before we dive into the content, because we had a vision of what these things could be. But as it turns out, creating card games is hard for those of you who haven't already figured that out. And so the amount of rigor and time that was spent creating the handful of cards that you all are about to see, it was staggering. I mean, we put the amount of internal resources we had staring at these things and the amount of editorial that had to do to every word and sentence, even before we showed them the Black Hills and Jason shot down all of our hilarious titles. It was really, it was a staggering amount of work. And it was non-trivial, especially given that we as Red Canary wanted to align the kind of stuff you all are about to see with not only Miter Attack and having that spirit of Atomic Red Team, but also with stuff that we've seen adversaries do in the wild that there wasn't cards for before. So anyway, I just, as a preface to what Tess is about to introduce, like this was not easy to generate.
Yeah, Tess is the real victim here because she wrote all the cards and then I came in and I broke her heart about all of them. And then we brought them to you and you broke our hearts collectively about all of them. So she experienced twice the trauma of anybody else.
It's a lot of heartbreak, but I am known for creating too many creative things that can't be published. So yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, let's get to USB drive-by. So the entire reason why we decided to put USB drive-by in was because we noticed that there weren't a ton of physical threat-based cards. There were some, and they were quite good, but there weren't any that were like super duper creative with specific tools that are in active use today. So we took some Hack 5 favorites, USB, Rubber Ducky, and Bash Bunny. But if you want to get more generic with it, you can also just say bad USB. Now, we also decided to base this off of one of our, I don't want to say favorite threats, Raspberry Robin, which we did name, and which is very commonly known for being picked up at print shops. So this is kind of an exact emulation, and it's a fun one. It's very, very interesting. I'm sure playing it is probably going to be very fun. I don't think we've drawn it yet, though.
Yeah. And if you notice at the bottom of each card, we always put a link on there, and people always wondered why we put a link on a physical card, mostly to just let you know that it exists, and then you could Google it later and find it that way. And so on the online version of Play.Backdoors and Breaches, the links do work. So if you just scroll down beneath the card, the links are available and it will take you to where you need to go. All right, compiled after delivery. Now I'm the one that gets to come up with all the like graphics for the cards. That's like my favorite thing to do. And I like to do it early in the morning where like my brain's still doing like the weird thing where it's like all weird sine waves or whatever. And so that's why some of the cards are like, why is this food ingredients? But can you explain what is compiled after delivery? Because like as you were explaining it to me, at first it was very complicated, and then it got more simplified and simplified as the time went on. So what's that?
So ironically, I'm going to let Kellen answer this because he hasn't spoken about anything yet, even though I know that Tess was the person who added this into the deck. But ironically, like when we were thinking about creating this deck, we were like, man, we could create cards with anything on it. So we did what we always do, which is like, let's go to ye old, like top list of threats we detected this year and top list of techniques we observed this year. And we'll just create all the cards based on like the things we see most often. And I think compiled after delivery, maybe like one of 2 or 3 cards that wasn't one of those. Like it wasn't among kind of our top threats, but Kellen, you can explain it, right? You're
smart.
You're a nerd.
Yeah, I've been told that throughout my whole life. And here we are today. It's culminated in this. I was about to say, yeah, like compiled after delivery is not one that I see very often when I'm like working with people, remediating threats and that sort of thing. And so I was like, it's interesting that we included this, but it is a fun one because like when you do see it, it's like, oh God, this looks really bad. Like there are like 5 or 6 files coming from this place that they probably shouldn't be coming from. And then all of a sudden those files get combined into a single file and form Voltron. And then your computer's real sad. It's like evil Voltron though. I don't know if
Yes. Oh, quick question for the audience. When you were watching Voltron growing up, what body part did you want to be? All right, moving on. Gatekeeper bypass. This was one, like a lot of times we don't want to be either Unix specific or Windows specific or Apple specific, but every once in a while, like it's good to be specific about a certain operating system. So gatekeeper bypass, could you explain what this one is?
Well, in the process of writing our threat detection report, I went to our threat research team and I was like, you guys can pick whatever technique you want to write about. And our Apple person was like, gatekeeper bypasses. It's basically just a way of like tricking a Mac OS computer into allowing a bad thing on your computer, right? Gatekeeper is supposed to stop that. If you can bypass it, you can get around that. So we wanted to have something Apple specific. And the way we were thinking about it is like a lot of organizations are all Windows, except that one executive that stubbornly insists that they have to have a Mac OS device on their network. So we thought it would be fun to kind of emulate that in the game.
Yeah. And if everyone takes a look at the cards, they have the tools that actually do these types of attacks. And if you notice, Atomic Red Team is on these cards. And so if you've never actually used Atomic Red Team or implemented it in your environment, maybe this will be the prompt that gets you using Atomic Red Team. All right, so the initial compromise is how the attackers initially get into the environment, right? The red cards are how attackers initially get in. So that's what we're covering right now, like the initial phase of the attack. And so we got two more. It's obfuscated payload delivery, which like you'll have to explain, and then RFID threat theft. We'll talk about that one, but start with the first one, obfuscated payload delivery. How does this work?
Okay, so there's a lot of ways to obfuscate a payload, but the general idea is you hide that baby. Very common one that most thrunters, such as Kellen, probably see is base 64 encoding, which I really quickly want to outline. Encoding is not encryption. Please don't think that. Encoding is just a way of making it look a different way. You can easily undo that. So this is basically just a way to quickly evade signature-based analysis. A lot of the time, there'll be very specific strings that a program will look for, and base 64 encoding or pretty much any type of fuzzing, any sort of obfuscation is trying to get past that.
One of the most common things we see at Red Canary across the terabyte of, or the petabyte of daily telemetry we process is obfuscated payloads. It's like a prerequisite. If you want to have a successful attack, you almost have to obfuscate your payload.
And that really speaks to the ubiquity of signature-based detection, which is both like great and also incredibly flawed. One of the things we see in general are folks trying to use Atomic Red Team in their environment just for testing, right? And we have found many EDR vendors who just signatured those files and like the literal like characters in the given commands inside of Atomic Red Team. And so people will be like, I downloaded the Atomic Red Team repo and this whole thing was quarantined. And what do? It's like, well, have you tried just changing a couple of the characters just to go from test to test one? And they do it. It's all fine. And that should be kind of terrifying to folks from a defender standpoint. But obfuscation is that, we see it daily because it is a prerequisite, because signature-based detection is just kind of everywhere. As silly as it may be in some circumstances, it's still effective.
I really feel like the word obfuscated is very security. Like if I use the word obfuscated at an insurance conference, they'd be like, what now? Well,
whatever. Insurance companies are constantly obfuscating things deep in small text at the bottom of the documents you sign so that you never have anything covered no matter what happens.
Yeah. If you see the word obfuscated at an insurance conference, they lean in and say, do you work for the IRS?
All right. RFID theft. What is this? How does this work? Why should it be a concern for security teams, especially as an initial compromise?
This is another one that did not come from our threat detection report. So Tess, I don't remember why we added this in. Do you?
I definitely do. So I got a little too excited when I was at B-Sides Charm, and I spent the entire conference doing the RF hackers CTF. This is kind of what they do. A lot of RFID work, a lot of wireless, and I was surprised we didn't have anything RFID, so I figured it would be kind of fun to add it in. Those of you who know what a flipper zero is, that's kind of baby's first method for RFID. And then you can work your way up and work into stuff like the Proxmark. But the entire idea is, you use it to copy or modify an RFID signal from an entry badge, and you can use that to gain physical access to whatever it grants physical access to. Thought that one would be kind of fun.
I actually got to do that for the first time at a Wild West Hacking Fest. It was a good time. It was actually quite frightening to see how easy it was to steal RFID and open up doors.
It's stupid easy.
Yeah,
it almost hurts.
Like I can do it. So,
well, I don't know if anyone caught this, but I call it RFID, and Tess calls it RFID, and now I want to have a conversation. Is it SIM?
Oh,
please don't.
So Tess is wrong. It's RFID. Even though she has way more nerd chops than I do, I'm putting my foot down here. It's RFID.
I call it what I want.
It's America, damn it.
I think I will start referring to it as RFID though, because it feels cooler. Like it's RFID theft.
Kind of sounds like a little dog barking. It's fun.
Arfed. All right. So moving on from initial compromise to pivot and escalate, which I feel like that's like your bread and butter is Atomic Red Team, right? Like, is that the bread and butter of Atomic Red Team is pivot and escalation?
Adam, that's a you question.
Yeah, it was one of those funny things when we were trying to map this stuff kind of intellectually to Atomic Red Team, because it doesn't super cleanly align with the way the nomenclature in the industry versus the nomenclature in Backdoors and Breaches versus the way we think about it. For the sake of this conversation, I would say that pivot and escalate really ended up being the bulk of what we were doing from an Atomic Red Team perspective. And kind of naively, we went into it thinking, oh, this is command and control stuff, right? Atomic Red Team, it's all about adversarial action. But when you come down to it, well, what are they doing inside in an environment? Pivot and escalate is them. And again, you start to lump in, like, where does discovery as a thing fit? Well, in Backdoors and Breaches land, pivot and escalate is kind of where a lot of that stuff tangentially lives. And so, yeah, I would say that if you had to align it, this is very much the strong arm of Atomic Red Team meets Backdoors and Breaches.
Yeah.
And fun
we got a couple cards. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, yeah, I was going to jump into this first card. So fun fact about this first card, we were just talking about like signature-based detections causing problems for people who want to download Atomic Red Team. So like if you go and start a VM and you go, I'm going to download Atomic Red Team, like immediately Windows Defender, not Defender for Endpoint, not like the good enterprise one, just the crummy one that's on everyone's computer is going to block it immediately. And one of the things that we detect most often adversaries doing is disabling that built-in default antivirus, and they do it with this PowerShell command that's like, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like set MP preference, disable real-time monitoring, true. So I, being a enterprising, young, not very good security person, was like, I wonder if I just copy that command into PowerShell and hit enter and then try to download Atomic Red Team again, if it'll work. And let me tell you, folks, it does work. So if you ever get blocked and you're trying to download Atomic Red Team, just go to the TDR, read the command we've got in there, or the test we've got in there for disabling Defender, run that bad boy, and you'll be able to download it no problem. So that's essentially why this first card is in here, right? We see this all the time. Thought it was an interesting thing.
I do want to add in the original names for some of these cards, just because people are asking.
Oh, let's go.
This one was called Fight the PowerShell, which is still really stupid now that I think about it.
No, it's delightful, Tess. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. It is a delightful term, and it's a shame it's not called that.
I was the person who I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. But high school students are using this to learn cybersecurity, and so
they can learn with puns.
I know, and I know it's the Red Canary deck. You should be able to do anything you want.
Jason's just thinking about all the executives and military commanders and other wacky people he's got to play this game with, and being like, I just can't. Everybody,
Can't do it.
Fun in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
I suggested that we get some stickers that have the alternative titles, and we can like just.
There were some really good ones.
They were so good. I felt bad inside when I was like, no.
Well, process injection was hiding in plain sight, and LSAS credential dump was LSAS credential dumpster fire.
Oh, that was a good one.
Really good one.
All right. So what is process injection? How to do it? How do attackers use this for pivot and escalation?
I think this is the perfect opportunity for Kellen to describe something.
I was just gonna say I could talk about process injection in some capacity.
Howdy, can you?
Yeah. No, so this is where like somebody jumps into a legitimate process to hide what they're doing. It's like it's like they throw on a sheet and pretend to be a ghost, but it's far less obvious sometimes that they shouldn't be there. A lot of times we see people injecting into like legitimate processes of like Explorer and those sorts of things, because Explorer lives forever, and if you inject into it, you're going to live forever too, until the computer turns off, of course, and then you're dead with the computer. Really common though, and sometimes it becomes really difficult to see what's happening after the fact, so it's a good way to hide.
Ian, if you're listening, we need a t-shirt that says "Shelling in the name of." That looks very much like that band. Okay. LSAS credential dump. I loved finding this graphic for this, by the way. It brought me great joy to like credentials and a dump. I know it's not the greatest, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So what is LSAS credential dump and how does it work?
It's a thing that the Black Hills Information Security Red Team probably does in every single one of their Red Team engagements, I would assume. Kelly, most of the time when we're seeing LSAS dumping, it's probably a Red Team, right?
Yeah, typically like LSAS dump, I haven't seen it as much in like adversary behavior anymore. It's mostly like a pen test Red Teamed style thing. So like when you see that come through, it's like, all right, who'd they hire? Who's there? But yeah, typically it's that. And then you end up with a lot of things touch LSAS now, and like that it's difficult sometimes to be like, oh, that's evil. Like, why is Word touching LSAS? And you have to figure out whether or not it should be. But LSAS is where all your juicy credentials are stored.
I think the dump truck is a really good image for that, because from a defender logging perspective, like you see weird stuff happening in LSAS, that's like a dump truck pulling up. Like, maybe we should look into that thing.
Yeah. And to the person who mentioned the shelling in the name of shirt, we'll make sure we send you one for free. And you can send me an email at some point in the future. And like you said, you were going to send me a shirt for free. And I'm like, I am so sorry. All right.
Oh, lucky Phil. There you go.
All right. So we got more pivot and escalate. Actually, I think you have more pivot and escalate than any other types of cards in here. What is application control bypass?
Something that is far too easy to do.
Yeah, in theory, you should be able to say as an administrator or an operating system, if we're going to personify an operating system, like, hey, these things aren't allowed to run on these computers, right? And application bypasses is kind of a broad term for any set of maneuvers that an adversary can do to kind of circumvent those sort of defensive controls.
And Tess, can you do us a favor and just give us like the name that we were going to call these for each one of them, and so we can disappoint everyone all at once, because apparently everyone is mad at me for changing the names of these. So what was
as well they should be. You've harmed me. Okay, so that one was awesome, but I also like scrapped it right away because there was no way that it was going to work. The name of it was going to be Run DLL the Jewels, but I couldn't find any Run the Jewels lyrics that were actually work safe. So yeah.
Yeah, we do a Run the Jewels Friday afternoon dance party here sometimes, and it's a little vulgar. It's fine. All right, next is read write with chip mode. Do I have to say it that way every time? Like chip mode 777.
You do, in fact, contractually. I can't remember what the original title for this was, but it wasn't fundamentally different.
It was about the same. It was chip mode 777.
So what is it? How do attackers? I mean, we have a definition on the card for sure, but tell us, why is it in the deck? Why did people use this for pivot and escalation?
I refuse to talk about anything Linux related.
I can pretend like I know stuff about Linux.
I'll take this one. Apparently, everybody's gonna go nose goes on the links.
I can handle that. I like Linux. I run Gen 2.
There you go. Tess, go ahead and take it away then.
Okay. Well, so those of you who know the Nix know that change mod 777 means you're basically just changing permissions. When you're specifically marking 777, you're setting the UID bits, and 7 is basically maxing it out. You're completely maxing permissions.
Yeah, and
which looks really suspicious.
Yeah, and to break it down, like read, write, execute are the kinds of permissions in the Nix operating systems. And the number one thing, if anybody who's spent any time in Linux and you're trying to like make a thing you wrote run and it's not doing it, and you're sad and you're wrestling with permissions, and Linux keeps telling you no, I can't do that yet. You just chmod 777 and hit enter, and great, it just fired for me. Well, it turns out adversaries love to do that too, and it's actually something very easy to look for.
And then PS exec abuse. All right. What is it?
Wow.
So this is another one of the things that wasn't mapped to the threat detection report, and I suspect we had a different. I think what happened is we had a different one that was, and then Deb, which she did a lot. Deb's wonderful, but very annoyingly, she would go and reference all the other decks as we were going through the cards, and she would be like, "This kind of sounds like that." She like kind of would play it coy and be like, "I don't know what this means, but it kind of sounds like this other thing." And she, of course, she knew exactly what she was doing, and she
It's
was
her
100%
job.
right? And so we'd be like, "All right, well, let's find something that's sort of like it." So PS exec, I think it's a sysinternals tool, right? And you see it occasionally be used for like adversaries moving from one computer to another, or using it to execute code between disparate machines on a network.
I liked
This one.
Brian's interpretation of Deb, impression of Deb. Really good
I
impression.
don't know what this means. Deb's like actually just like, yeah, no, we need to make it more clear. Like truly. But Brian heard something entirely different.
Yeah.
The original name for this one was, by the way, the printer Samba, because it typically deals with SMB and admin shares.
You're right.
Yeah.
And
Great title.
It's great because I mean Samba's already, and then I don't know, you get it. You get the idea.
At some point in the future, people are going to be very confused by what the tool is on here of a fax machine. So why is a fax machine on this card?
Because fax machines are really good for pivoting. You can move laterally using fax machines that are connected to machines, just other corporate machines. You can just keep moving laterally using them because nobody thinks about them, and printers are evil, and so are fax machines.
I was just about to say, like, printers are basically a super highway through an enterprise because nobody knows how to secure them and nobody wants to because printers are cursed objects.
I sat next to the printer at my first office, like back in Yield days when we went to offices all the time. I just happened to sit next to it. I was like 22, and everyone assumed that because I sat next to it, I knew how to work the printer, which like couldn't have been further from the truth. And this printer was garbage. It was a piece of trash, like all printers are. And literally daily, I would have someone like having me come and help them troubleshoot the stupid printer.
People who know nothing about troubleshooting know more about printers than people who know how to troubleshoot.
I was probably the best person to troubleshoot that printer.
I like all the like news articles coming out about like Gen Z going to the office for the first time and trying to work the printer, and like, you know, Gen X is like, you don't know how to work a printer, and they're like, you don't know how, like, it's fascinating. How
this is where we
some
tap the
technology-
sign.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
gotta tap the sign that says percussive maintenance over and over and over again until finally somebody breaks the freaking printer. We don't want to deal with that crap.
All right, moving on. Last pivot and escalate card is lateral tool transfer. What is lateral tool transfer? Why is it here?
Well, it's a whole lot easier to just move things from one place to another that you're already in. So, you know, rather than bringing more evil inside the house you've already broken into, you just move the evil you've already brought in from one room to the next, and it's harder to detect, hopefully. So that's really what's happening here, is like when an attacker brings down their malicious payload and they can throw it on like a file share or something of the environment they're in, and they can just distribute that across the environment a whole lot easier rather than like talking to their command and control.
And especially from a network perspective, I mean, as a defender, you say, okay, well, our developers need access to GitHub and everything that's on it, but our HR department probably doesn't. And that's a really smart rule. But guess what? If your developer, if there's something on that's compromised, well, the thing they pulled down from GitHub, they could just toss over across, you know, laterally across the network instead of having to try to pull that down independently and trip that network. Or that firewall or what have you, those kind of alerting. And so it's practically speaking just a lot safer as well. And people just don't watch their device to device traffic as closely as they watch their inbound outbound.
And it's expensive to do so. Like that's a big prohibitor, is like the left to right traffic is loud and it produces a lot of noise. I saw a question in Discord and I kind of want to jump on it. Like,
sure.
Somebody mentioned, you know, hey, I see a lot of PS exec in my environment. And I think it's interesting that that's a call out, because like a lot of the things we're talking about here are using things that aren't necessarily inherently evil. They might leverage some things that are built into your operating system, or your technology stack that are legitimate to try and blend in. So when you see PS exec in your environment, it's not necessarily an indicator of like, whoa, we're popped, we're hacked. That's when you kind of have to figure out, okay, what's that normal look like, and where's the bad in this? So just want to make that call out.
All right, C2 and exfiltration. So command and control and exfiltration of data. We got 4 new C2 and exfil cards, and I just want to let everyone know C2 and exfil cards are the hardest ones to come up with that haven't already been done. And so the fact that we have 4 new ones here is good. And so if you're now playing Backdoors and Breaches, you're using the Red Canary deck, and so you have these new C2 and exfils, potential things to think of. This will help you and your teams that are playing this game using the expansion deck go like, we hadn't thought about that. And that's what that's the goal of Backdoors and Breaches, is for the team to go like, we had not thought about that, because it gets you thinking about it, gets you talking about it, gets you planning either to mitigate it or live with the risk. So we got cloud services as exfil. Tell me about this one.
The cloud's hot right now, Jason. So we decided we needed to add some cloud stuff here. So the idea here being like, in the context of the game, we didn't see a ton of stuff where it was like abuse of cloud resources. So we thought maybe we would toss in sort of a curveball here where it's like, all right, so the adversaries have now abused your access tokens, gotten into your cloud environment that does whatever. And what are you going to do about it?
This was when we debated internally, like, do we see threat actors using folks' corporate cloud environments to tunnel stuff in and out of a corporate network? And how do you do that? Is there weird VPN rules and the like? And when we looked at it hard, it's like, well, yeah, not only does this happen and it's a little obscure, like it's a really good way to bypass a lot of monitoring, because hey, it's our cloud environment. What kind of evil could be there coming downstream to our corporate network or just the network itself? And so, yeah, this is when we looked at real hard, and it's interesting stuff. And it's a good thing for folks to think about if you're like, oh, the relationship between our cloud infrastructure and the protection we have for that, and our corporate network and the protection we have for that, how are these things tied together? And are we watching that link closely?
And one of the reasons why we do these introduction of the new decks for you all to watch as a webcast is to start the conversation of that these cards exist, these attacks exist, this technique exists, and for you to start thinking about it. That's what the whole point of the game is. But this kind of gives you an overview of all the new cards and why they were added. So authorized remote tools. Tess, I believe this one was your card. And do you remember what the original title for these were? But first, tell us about authorized remote tools and how that's a form of command and control or exfil.
Okay, so remote administration tools, and I'm writing a thing on this that got very hotly debated too. So rats, remote access Trojans, but there's also remote access tools. The entire thing that I think we decided on, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you were the one who drafted this entire idea, is that it's entirely dependent upon the hands of the person who's actually running the tool, whether it's malicious or not. If you have it in the hands of a legitimate network administrator who's using it for good things, then that's a remote access tool. If not, that's a rat. So yeah, general idea, authorized remote tools. It becomes a rat when it's no longer a remote access tool. Basically, you're exfiltrating confidential information through a fully permitted tool, but it's just changed hands.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the original title was for this? Because I do, without even looking it up.
I think we went through like 4 different titles for this because we straight up couldn't decide, but on my sheet, I think it's Rat Downloaded, which is dumb.
Oh, no, I think it was Dirty.
Oh, no, it was
Rat.
Dirty Rat, I think was the first one. Yeah. And Cloud Services as exfil was Drive It Like You Stole It, hence why it says the attackers hitch a ride.
That was my favorite one, I think. Drive It Like You Stole It.
It was great.
Anyway, Jason, again, he told us no.
Yeah, it had to be somehow useful for people to learn. So anyway, Bluetooth is exfil. Bluetooth is exfil. It's one of the cards that has the physical security review. It's one of the procedure cards that's in your deck. And so what is Bluetooth as exfil and how can it be used?
So this was one that I didn't even know existed until I started ripping through random techniques. And by the way, the original name was the Bluetooth Fairy. But yeah, so very commonly you see unusual methods of exfil, but not so commonly do you see ones that are more physically based. The entire idea behind this one is you can exfiltrate data via any Bluetooth enabled device. Yeah, there are tools for this. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I certainly was when I found it, that there are whole suites for exfiltrating tons of data via Bluetooth.
It's really interesting too, because like we have people bring that up to us as like a concern sometimes. So, like, how do I monitor that? How do I look for this? And it's like, oh gosh, this is tough. Like, does DLP work here?
Yeah, we discussed it at length. Like, how would you detect something like that?
I remember that. We were just kind of like, this is bad.
Yeah, and this is where you drift into the really dangerous world of like threat modeling insider threats, because it's just incredibly hard to do, especially looking at something like authorized remote tools. Okay, well, this tool is authorized in your corporate environment. Well, what if the person is an employee and they're using it for malicious reasons? Like, you get this crazy nested onion of threat actor models at this point, where it's like this person, you pay them to have backdoor access into every endpoint, and now they're using it maliciously. Well, what do you do then? And Bluetooth as exfil is one of those things, like, that's probably an insider threat. And how on earth do you keep an eye on that?
I think that the good news for everyone who might be worried about this is Bluetooth barely works under the best of conditions. So I think you can just sort of hang your hat on the fact that, like, whatever anyone's trying to exfiltrate with Bluetooth is probably going to come out not complete and, utterly broken anyway. So rest assured.
Yep. Okay.
Confident.
Malicious access point. Just one other thing to note is, like, when we go through these cards and it's got the detections on it and you see all the detections, the rule of thumb is it has to have at least 2 detections available inside backdoors and breaches, and no more than 4, because at some point, sure, everything could catch it, but there's this long, like, the meeting is the worst. We bring in people who haven't seen the cards and we're like, so what would detect this? And almost every answer is, well, it depends. And you're like, oh my God. So at some point you have to, like, does it depend a lot or does it depend a little? And so we kind of whittle it down to no more than 4 detections per attack. But in your environment, these again, once again, are baseline. And to the person who asked, are we going to play at the end? We are not playing at the end. We're introducing the cards, we're introducing the attacks, and we're introducing the injects here in the next few minutes. And this webcast is more about how to get started. But if you want to play Backdoors and Breaches, if you want to play with people here on the Black Hills Infosec Discord server, if you type the word play into the chat, we'll make sure that you get the right role, which will give you new chat channels and new video chat channels so that you can actually play here. And if you want to lead a session, type the word lead. So type play if you want to play, type lead if you want to lead. All right. So also, that doesn't do anything. Someone asked me, I was like, so what happens if I hit play? Does it, like, bring up Backdoors and Breaches and all of a sudden people are playing? No, it just helps us figure out who wants to play and corral you on. Corral is a bad word. Identify people who want to play for future games. All right. So malicious access point. Tell me about this one.
I have a story.
I was gonna say, such a good story.
I have a good story. When I was an associate, a wee baby associate many years ago, working at a large security conference, we had an event where we started noticing a big dip in amount of people connected to the Wi-Fi, and we were like, oh crap, that's not good. What is that about? This is a literal security conference. Why are all of these nerds suddenly not connecting to Wi-Fi? And started walking around having to basically having to fox hunt and realizing that there was a malicious AP in a plant pot. Hence the original name for this card, which was planted AP. Ha 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 ha, silly, dumb. long story short, just disabled that malicious access point and called it a day. There wasn't really anything to be done about it. Couldn't figure out who it was. So yeah, this is a real thing. It's a real thing that happens, and actually happens quite commonly at security conferences. So now you know.
I legitimately worry about like rogue access points probably more than I should. It's very much like a kid who's worried about quicksand growing up.
Well,
I'm just
no, but this, I think there's something really key here, where if you think about people as consumers, just like strangers, right? You get a cell phone from your carrier, and one of the perks of that is like, hey, guess what? You're going to auto connect to the carrier Wi-Fi that's in all sorts of public places and airports and sporting goods stores and whatever. And so folks are now used to like, oh, my phone's just connected to this rando Wi-Fi that was in there when I first turned it on. Like, you never offed yourself, no password or anything like that. And so the prospect of people just being like, yeah, my device is connected to this other thing now, like that's something that's kind of bled into the ethos of a consumer. And so trying to be like, oh, by the way, that's not always supposed to happen, and sometimes it's super dangerous. It's one of those things that it takes a lot of education. And then when someone's really tactically like, whoa, we're just going to put this access point in a place and we're going to bury it in a plant pot for nefarious reasons, like that takes it to a whole new scale. So it's important to think about.
Yeah. Okay. Persistence. Let's go through these a little quicker because I want to get to the inject. So we got event triggered execution, scheduled task, rename process. So persistence is, the attackers want to find a way to stay in your environment. So run through these real quick. Tests, real fast, each one.
Event triggered execution. So WMI event is subscription. Yeah, it's basically just standard persistence via WMI event. Nothing more to say about that, really. We didn't even have a good name for it. It was just remote system modification. Sounds like crap. Yeah. Scheduled task. All right, it's a scheduled task on a Windows system, for God's sake. Same deal. But that one we did have a good name for, and that was called Immortal Rat. Hey, Immortal Rat. And then we had rename process, which was crap. I don't know which one that was. We'll figure it out. But yeah, you rename a system utility, you rename a login or whatever, and you make it so that nobody really knows what it is, and that their malicious executions look totally, completely normal.
This reminds me of, like, before getting in cybersecurity, like a long time ago, and I had a computer and I'd like something's not working right. I'd right click and bring up taskbar in the task manager, and then I'd like, I have no idea what's happening. All this is it's
fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. Don't worry about it. And also, I found the name for that one.
Yeah,
I think we all do.
Why do I have 3 Explorer processes? Do I need all of them?
Yeah.
Who knows? The name for that one was "It's Not What It Looks Like."
Oh, great name.
Yeah, that was a good one.
All right, and the last persistence is spawn web shell. Brian, what's spawn web shell?
It's a web shell is a shell is a thing you can use to control an operating system. So a web shell is the real thing here is like the reason why we have this is because whenever we see like a Microsoft Exchange 0-day that pops up in the wild, the way we detect it is they're using it to spawn web shells on these various servers. So it's a shell on some sort of web property. In this case, I think we were kind of referencing email servers.
This is my plug to take your email servers
off the internet.
Off the internet. If you don't know where your email servers are, please identify where they are. Please.
Please. Its original name was Windows Wildcard too, which wasn't quite as creative. I feel like it could have been something having to do with crustaceans.
So the inject cards are fun and are interesting. And if you're ever playing Backdoors and Breaches, they enter into the game either at the decision of the incident captain saying it's time for an inject card, or you roll 20, roll 1, or you have 3 failed rolls in a row. And so they got to come up with their own inject cards. They got to be fun. We just had to make sure they made sense. So we got this one, Missed Payday. Adam, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is the nightmare scenario of adversaries compromising your HR system and specifically your payroll system, which is real bad. And not only that, like the implications of these things when employees start missing paychecks, you have all sorts of weird morale stuff, in addition to all the cybersecurity nightmares and legal nightmares and the liability and all these sorts of things. So yeah, when adversaries start to compromise things that play ball with HR, you get sad. Jason, a question to you: the angry chicken.
What's you know, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
No further questions.
So what happens if this inject card gets played? Everyone rolls the dice. Whoever has the lowest number has to remain silent for the rest of the session because essentially they were let go. Someone asked if incident captains can play inject cards at any time for the lulz. Essentially, yes. If you are watching the game and it's going too well, feel free to throw an inject card in. If it's not going very good at all, throw an inject card in. It is up to the discretion of the incident captain. But generally, when the team rolls a 20, a 1, or have 3 failed rolls in a row, but there you go. Not a red team. So not a red team. What's this one?
Well, it's not a red team. So idea here being like your threat hunting team, which Kellen is a proud threat hunter. So your threat hunting team finds C2 beacons, which is bad. That means that there's a way for some bad guy probably to put things onto your computers that you don't want there. And then the consequence of that is that actually I don't fully understand this consequence. So I'm going to actually kick it back to you, Jason, as the person who's probably least experienced playing this game.
Sure. So when a game starts, you always have an initial compromise, pivot and escalate, C2 and exfil, and persistence card. So that you have 4 cards. But there are some inject cards that cause you to have more attack cards. So what happens now is I draw an additional persistence card and draw an additional pivot and escalate card. And so now the team has to solve 6.
So the game got 50% worse.
Yes.
With 1 card. Got it.
That is correct.
And to be clear, this card is based off of an actual event where we were working with a red and a blue team, and the blue team kicked the door in on the red. Be like, haha, got you. And the red team all looked up and be like, got what? And then they go, oh no.
The missed payday is based on a real thing that happened as well. Although we did manage to stop it before payday got missed, but.
Yep. We got D's registry keys, please. This one looks bad. Kind of.
And yet
I
it's
really
not.
want to know the alternate title to these ones that start with D's. So please enlighten me.
Oh,
we
that
got
is
to
the
keep
alternate
original
title.
titles here. Yeah.
Yeah.
These ones are the originals.
The more ridiculous, the more likely it is that they're the original.
Yeah.
So, malicious registry keys. They appeared. It's horrible. It's absolutely rampant in the environment, but we decided to turn this one into a positive because everything doom and gloom with injects makes you just not want any more injects in your game.
Yeah.
So management cares. Management actually wants to do something about it. So they gave you a little bit more time, and they gave you a consultant so that you can chill and work it out. They actually care, dude. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're thinking gameplay, like they just said, if all the cards are just terrible, you never want an inject card. So every once in a while you have to have like some sort of hope that you pull an inject card and you're like, oh, okay, it's good. Quishing, Kellen.
Adam.
It's gotta go to Adam.
Can't wait to throw some quishes.
All right, Adam, what is quishing?
This is one of those things that we're just true believers that this is a real thing and it needs to be taken seriously. But the idea is that you have no way of auditing those QR codes visually. And so you scan it and it takes you to some rando thing. And you're like, well, seems legit to me. And especially for someone who has insider knowledge about, everybody uses these QR codes. They could put all sorts of stickers on top of those things that look exactly real. So, and again, this is like a real threat that we're seeing in the wild, and like real fraud is happening in like the quishing. So it's real, everybody. And if we can get MITRE ATT&CK to make a quishing as a subcategory, that'd be aces. Been working on that one for a while. So anyway, that's where quishing was born.
Adam is engaged in 2 conspiracies. One was to get the Red Canary, Atomic Red Team, Black Hills, Backdoors and Breaches deck, which he succeeded in. And then the other is to get quishing into MITRE ATT&CK, which we're working very hard on, and they are not nearly as amused by it as we are.
It's a very present danger. You can't track it very easily. You can't really determine that it came from a quish. And that's
Everything's using QR codes now. Everything. I thought they were dead. Like a decade ago, I was like, these things are dead. And now they're everywhere.
Go to a
Everywhere.
restaurant. All the restaurants that are like, touchless menus now. What if you slap a sticker on one of those and you're like,
Adam's probably done it before. It
your
sounded
phones are belong to
suspiciously-
us now?
So I
Suspiciously
was a part of
background.
developing this game, and I didn't understand Quish until just right now. Like this whole time until Kellen was like, "It's a Quish," and I was like, "It's a fish with a Q." Oh god,
It's a QR code fish. Sorry, but we should have led with that. The entire audience is like leaning forward and pressed against their monitors. Yeah, it's a QR code fish. It's a anyway.
Portmanteau of the words
Thank
fishing
you.
and QR code.
I'm today years old. Okay. So we got nuclear test site and we're running out of time. For those of you that joined us today, most likely you like Backdoors and Breaches and you play it, or this is all new to you. But if you are interested in learning to play Backdoors and Breaches, just stick around the Black Hills Infosec Discord, play some games with other people, get some people involved in your local community. Let's get nuclear test site. Tell me about this one.
Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, well, if you're using Atomic Red Team, you're testing your stuff, you're validating, your telemetry sources and what things are gonna look like in your environment, then you're gonna be better at doing endpoint and endpoint security protection analysis. So we want to reward people for practicing.
Did Kellen just freeze, or was it me?
No, they're gone. Kellen's gone.
Okay, looks like Tessa's gone, Brian's gone.
I'm still here.
Okay, all right. So cats on keyboard delete. How could they three be gone, but you and I are still here? So either you and I are gone, or all three of them are gone.
Unclear. The recording will be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Huh?
Do we need a replacement, Brian? I can't. I'm not as smart as him, but
Do
I
we?
can try.
Can the audience,
Replacement Brian? Yeah.
wait? Who can the audience hear right now?
All right,
Is
so the
question.
audience can see us, me and you, but the other three are
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you and I will keep going then.
So wrapping it up, we have this undocumented system. So I want to talk to you about this one. This is one of my favorite cards that we've created so far because it creates such an ethical question for the team. And it's essentially like, you find an old computer and on that computer is 200 Bitcoin from 2010. And it says the defenders order pizza and discuss if they're going to tell management or not. And the only thing, like what I really like about this card, if it gets played in the game, is what if that happens?
Yeah, and it is one of those things where it brings up the concepts of asset management, which is one of the least interesting but most important things that any organization can do, and no one does it well. And then additionally, how do people respond to that when there's exceptional amounts of value on this thing that you just haven't tracked? And I love this. I love to hear the conversations that spin out of this exact conversation.
Yeah. And it looks like the rest of them are trying to come back. Tess is there. I think Kellen is in the background, but I think they need to be.
Yeah, I'm here.
You
Post
need to enable our video.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
That was weird that all three of you got wiped out, but not.
Not Adam.
Yeah.
That was very strange.
Maybe it's like
That's
an out-
okay.
The
somewhere.
audience said that they scanned the QR code.
Now you know. Now you have to be
I'm
subscribed to our newsletter.
All right, and we're gonna wrap up
Ha, ha,
with this because you're back. In Backdoors and Breaches, there are consultants that you can call because every once in a while the game is either not going well or you're struggling to figure out what is that attack. And now that we have even more attacks and more attacks and more attacks and more attacks and more attacks, it might be more difficult for you to narrow down what could potentially be happening. So you can actually call a consultant. We got Adam here. Adam, you're actually a consulting card here. We got Carrie Roberts, who has essentially done so much for the Atomic Red Team project. And then Mike Haig. So you can call a consultant. What you do is if you want to do that, you roll the dice. 11 through 20 is successful. That means you get to call the consultant of your choice. If you roll 1 through 10, then they are unavailable. And you get to talk about why that is. So with our last few minutes here, we're going to open it up for an extra few minutes for those of you that can stay. We call it post-show banter, where we can answer some Q&A. But I'm going to say thank you so much for attending, for joining, for being a part of this. Generally, people who show up for Backdoors and Breaches webcast are people who play Backdoors and Breaches, and we thank you for helping people discover this game and use this game to do incident response tabletops that have improved security for the last couple years that this game has been around. And so thank you for using that. All right, we got Ian back. We got others back. I have final words from Red Canary before we run out of time. Brian, I'll start with you. Any final thoughts?
Hey, just thanks so much for letting us do this. We had like a great time putting all these decks together. It was a lot of work, but it was also a lot of fun. And then thanks for inviting us onto this webcast. We enjoyed this as well. We hope it's not the last time that you enjoy people or that you invite people from Red Canary onto a Black Hills webcast.
Tess, final thoughts for you.
Somehow you haven't scared us away. Yeah. It's always really fun to be on a webcast with you guys. Putting together these cards was insanity, which is a good thing. You did destroy my spirit several times, but I'm fine. I swear. I'm fine. And yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Yeah. Adam, final thoughts for you?
I just appreciate you all working with us on this and the guidance and the willingness to go through all of our silly titles. And really looking forward to seeing everybody at Wild West Hackin' Fest.
It does feel like just yesterday we were at that booth talking about what would it be like if we created an expansion deck, and like it's taken a long time to get here, but now that's going to be here and it would just keep getting printed, and it's available online for anyone to play. Kellen, final thoughts for you?
Yeah, no, this was a really cool experience. It was super fun. I've run a couple games internally with some people at Red Canary using the new deck, and it's just been a blast. Some of the physical security stuff has really opened up some really interesting scenarios. So highly recommend checking it out, playing it. Come see us at Black Hat, and we can play some games too.
And
yeah,
Kellen,
also huge thanks to Laura Brosnan, who isn't on the webinar right now, but probably did more work to make this deck become a thing than any of the rest of us.
Definitely. Thank you, Laura.
Huge thanks to Laura.
And Kellen, thank you for being a supporter of Backdoors and Breaches. Like, you were running live streams like during the pandemic. You were bringing people together. Like, you're one of the reasons that this spread to the people that it spread to. So thank you for doing that. All right, Ian, I'm going to do the whole like, thank you so much for joining us on this Black Hills Information Security webcast. If you want to stick around for a few minutes for a Q&A, feel free to do so. If you got to run, I understand. Thank you so much. And I'll see you all in about 2 months. I'm taking a sabbatical, and then I'll be back at the end of September. So if you're like, where's Jason? Jason's on a sabbatical. All right, Ian, what do we got?
Well, a couple things. One, as people are leaving too, the first place that the deck is going to be available is at Red Canary's booth at Black Hat, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. So for all of you who are going to be at summer camp, if you're at the expo hall for Black Hat, please head over and see our fine friends here to get a copy of that. Also, I don't think we'll have any at the DEF CON booth, but if our friends at Red Canary want to come over and hang out and talk about it, please do. So that said, we got a bunch of questions. Samir Karam said, can we have a home lab of Canary to get our hands on? Does that make sense to you
So
guys?
this is one of those things where the audience, this Black Hills audience, tends to know Red Canary from Atomic Red Team. So when we hear things like, can I have a Red Canary lab? We usually interpret that as, can you help me set up Atomic Red Team in my lab environment, is usually the way we hear that question. If you want to know more about that, atomicredteam.io or the repo itself and the wiki that's tied into that GitHub repo will walk you through everything you could possibly want to know about setting up Atomic Red Team. As far as Red Canary and our MDR service, we are a service provider, and that's our proprietary thing. And so you can't set it up in your lab. This is TLDR.
Very good. All right. So KGood 517, is Blue Hydra effective as a tool for defending with Bluetooth as exfil with an Ubertooth? So it comes from when you were talking about the Bluetooth card.
I don't know what any of those words mean,
Fantastic.
but Tess might.
I'm Googling Blue Hydra right now.
He's asking our best analyst.
Chat GPT.
Yeah, basically. ChatGPT probably would have been faster at reading because I can't actually read.
So I I played around with it a little bit when I was researching. It has been a couple of months, so I can't give you exact details on how it works, but I know that it's based off of the Blues library, which is kind of standard for pretty much any Linux. Yeah, like you can use an Ubertooth if you know what that is. It's just kind of a USB little Bluetooth dongle. It's more tracking based. It's very similar to like Kismet-ish. And in fact, I think you can plug it into Kismet that way. So yeah.
Cool. Let's see here. Veritas 06 in the latest of speaks. Is the ability to combine decks a planned feature? Now, Jason, I think you already answered that in the Discord, but for the folks asking.
Yeah, so right now when you go to play.backdoorsandbreaches.com, you're essentially selecting each deck to play. If you have the physical decks, they all work together. So any expansion deck will work with the core deck, and you can combine expansion decks into the core deck, and just gives you more options. That is a huge consideration when we play this, when we're working out, like, all right, so if this is my pivot and escalate, what initial compromise did I use to get here? And if you're like, none of those, and you're like, okay, so that's not going to work. So the game is interchangeable. Every once in a while, you're like, that is a huge leap. And so at the end of the conversation, we always talk about, is this a plausible attack in our environment? You're like, well, no, because that could never happen here. And I don't know how that would lead to this, but that also turns into the conversation of like, no, it's not possible. But then you have to defend your thesis, like, no, it's not possible, and this is why. So even if it works or doesn't work, it's still a conversation starter for those things.
So we got Brian Martin. They were making a comment around some of the attacks. They're saying SCCM uses, and forgive me, what card a lot, but the conversation was around the living off the land attacks. So one good way to catch it would be establishing a baseline with a frequently running query or something with your seam, and checking for any spikes or outliers, outlier hosts running it. Not really a question, but more of a statement. Would you agree with that? Is that a good way to look for living off the land attacks?
I mean, I
Yeah.
guess that makes sense, baselining for basically anything.
But
So,
therein lies the difficulty, right? It's so easy for us to say, like, oh, just absorb all
Just
this data and put it in
baseline.
your sim and baseline it and keep it for a bunch of time. Meanwhile, the person who's running the finances on how much your sim costs is like, well, my wallet's getting white hot and burning through my table right now. So like, it absolutely makes sense. Have reasonable alerting, have log aggregation, have all these things be in your sim, build charting and reporting around what is normal activity. But keep in mind that a lot of people are really constrained by the resources they have. Not even talking about, okay, let's say you have a sim and you can afford to keep any amount of data in it. Do you have the people who know how to make these things go burr, right? And that's one of those things. It's just really, really tricky. But yeah, that's great guidance for the folks who are equipped to do that.
Yeah.
So something interesting happened. It seems we were streaming to LinkedIn as well, which we don't generally do, because we got somebody come in from LinkedIn. So cool to know that works. With that said, Harold Solomon from LinkedIn, in theory, you can catch syslogs of Bluetooth on managed devices and see what is getting transferred to kick out a playbook. Have you ever looked at that? Looking at syslog for Bluetooth connections to kick off like a Jupyter playbook or something like that?
Paul suggested something, our colleague Paul, when we were discussing this, but I don't think it was that. I can't remember what wacky off the wall detection idea he came up with for it.
Okay. No, that seemed very interesting. So I'm just going to repeat this one just because I thought it was kind of funny, and it's the last kind of question we've got here. But it says the incident captain can play an inject card just for giggles. So that was from an anonymous attendee, and the short answer is yes, absolutely. You are the keeper of that realm. You can do whatever you want. And we had a couple things coming through QA when y'all dropped out of the Zoom, which was kind of funny. A lot of people, well, I used an inject card, but I think my favorite was Phil's here that says, Phil Hagen, someone played Backhoe Takes Out Fiber Backbone in real life.
Thank you, Phil.
Yes. So that was the questions there. I'm sorry, Tess?
Oh, we keep coming up with more and more cards to add. Kellen had a great one last time we were playing, but It's like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, no, we're not doing it though. I
It's
mean,
a great-
we might. Maybe another deck, huh? Maybe another
See,
one.
expansion. I think TikTok is C2 is gonna happen. Somebody's gonna use it. It's gonna be
Yes.
great.
Yeah,
Of
TikTok and C2 is
course.
probably happening. We just haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
Last thing I'd like to end with, though, before Jason, you really close it out, is a couple times I've pasted into the chats here. Like was said, please, if you're out at DEF CON or Black Hat Summer Camp, please come see the Red Canary folks at their booth. Do you know what booth number y'all are in? Can you share that? Oh,
Keep talking. I'll figure it out.
Ooh, we're not marketing. Yeah.
Oh, they're in the expo hall somewhere.
Ooh.
Go find the Red Canary. I have several of the Red Canary shirts. They're my favorite shirts after, of course, Black Hill shirts.
This is the one you'll get.
Yes,
The
that
black
one-
on black.
Those. It is
Black on black.
awesome. Oh,
What do
Jason's
we got?
sharing something. If you stop by the Black Hills booth at DEF CON, which is the first time they're doing an exhibitor hall, Jason, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so just now I got the print proof back for our very first comic book that we're making with Darknet Diaries. So hopefully there'll be more. But this is, if you've ever seen the show like Tales from the Crypt or anything like that, we're trying to create a comic book series with Jack from Darknet Diaries. And it's comic books together, like comic book creators working with us, working with Jack to create. And this is the artwork for it, and it is fantastic. It is a great story. It's Jeremy in marketing. It's gonna be the very first comic that we make with Darknet Diaries, and it'll be available at it'll be available at DEF CON, and at some point Jack will be signing copies of it at the booth at DEF CON. So that's gonna be really cool.
We're going to release those times here in the next couple weeks. Just keep an eye on social media for a card that will show you all the places you can come engage with fine folks Black. And we're hearing some intel that your booth number is 2820.
I was just going to say it's 2820. I just found it.
20. Excellent. Let's take a look here. So yeah, come see us out there. And then also for all of you that asked, the first place that you can get this deck is at the Black Hat booth. After that, it will be on sale at the Spearfish General Store. So you'll be able to pick it up there. And I think that's it. But definitely check out the links as well. If you liked all this, we're going to be hanging out on August 23rd for our Antisyphon Blue Team Summit. And definitely come see all of us at Wild West Hackin' Fest in October.
I do want to apologize to Ian, because when I threw out that demo thing in Discord, I realized that that's him because I'm leaving for 2 months. So Ian,
What am I doing?
demos for people who said demo in Discord. So we'll figure all that out. Well, I won't. I'll be gone. Red Canary, Adam, Tess, Kellen, Brian, Laura, Shelly, and Phil, and all of the others from Red Canary. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for wanting to be a part of this, this Backdoors and Breaches. Like when it was an idea a long time ago, we're like, I don't know if a card game for incident response will do anything. And it ended up doing something. And it keeps doing something. And so thank you for being a part of the legacy of whatever it does over the next couple of years. So yeah, that's it. All right, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
kill it with fire.
Thanks, everybody.
I will kill things.
Thank you.
Yep.
So good.
I think actually you're host right now.
Oh,
I
do I
can't
get to
do
kill
it.
it with fire?
You get to kill it with fire.
I get to kill it with fire.
And
you get to
meeting
press the
for
big
all.
red button.
In 5, 4, 3.